Welcome to this webinar hosted by the Signify Lighting Academy. My name is Mario Giordano. I'm the global head of the public and government affairs here at Signify, and today I have here the pleasure to introduce you to this webinar with our guest for the urban transition mission. Just a second to introduce a little bit about Signify. Most of you might know it, but Signify is the new name of Philips Lighting, is the world leader in lighting for professionals and consumer. We are definitely the number one in connected and conventional lighting and in the Internet of Things. Our energy efficient lighting products and system and services enable our customers to enjoy superior quality of light all around the world. We are active in more than 70 countries all around the world, turnover approximately 6 billion, and we have across the world 29,000 colleagues working with us on the same purpose. Interesting enough, without going into the details of this number, I think there is one number which is very important and really updated, just released by the IEA, the International Energy Agency, which estimates that lighting accounts in 2025 around 9% of the global electricity demand. So all around the world, on average, 9% of the electricity consumed is somehow consumed by a light source. You can find this information in more details in the next wave of LED lighting on the IEA website. And this is also the reason why we have in our purpose to unlock the extraordinary potential of light for brighter lives and better world. And we know that by doing so, we can be closer to the citizens, people in every place they live in. Today, I'm really glad, I'm really happy to have Giorgia with us, not only because we share the same nationality, of course we are both Italian, that's a coincidence, but because we share the same purpose, the same ambition to make transformation, to make climate action across cities. And of course, today I have the pleasure to have Giorgia, which is the director of our mission innovations, the urban transition mission. Giorgia works at global level. We were in Brazil just in the pre-COP last November together with cities, together with policymakers. And Giorgia works at global level to mobilize decision makers across all tiers of government, accelerating climate neutral and net zero pathways through clean energy and systemic innovation. Without further ado, we are really delighted to have Giorgia with us today to share her global perspective on how urban action can truly make a difference. Giorgia, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mario, for the kind introduction and for the invitation to join you today. And it is my pleasure to share some reflection with you today around what is the state of play when it comes to lighting and lighting infrastructures in cities, but also to unveil some of the trends that we see increasingly becoming more and more important in our communities across the world. I also would like to share with you a few examples of good practices to really show how in real life, when we change our lighting infrastructure and we improve our lighting system, we can really make an impact, again, to reach our net zero resilient and inclusive city. But please allow me to start just by framing a little bit and telling you a little bit about the urban transition mission that I have the pleasure to be the director of. The mission is an initiative, part of a larger umbrella initiative that started at COP, the Conference of the Parties in Paris, about now 6 years ago. The idea was one and simple, but not easy to implement, to catalyze investment in research, demonstration, and deployment of clean and affordable energy across the world. 7 initiatives, 7 missions were born out of this attempt. Some were focusing on specific sectors like industry or shipping, others looking more into technologies like hydrogen, for example. And as I always like to say, ours, that it's a bit of a special mission, the only place-based one that looks into activating, empowering cities in their transition to becoming net zero resilient and inclusive. Because of the complexity of urban ecosystems, indeed, we are not just looking into improving efficiency and increasing the amount of clean energy in our ecosystem, but to do that through systemic innovation. So mobilizing decision makers across level, empowering cities with knowledge of what holistic transition powered by innovation could look like, and brokering solutions and approaches from the real need of the community to the possible solutions that are available out there. Other new and innovative ones that can be co-designed or co-developed, or those ones that might even be familiar to most, but have not reached the scale of change that we currently need to fully benefit from the technologies themselves. We work together with a global alliance of partners. This is indeed a very tall order. Among our co-leads, we count the Global Covenant of Mayors of Climate and Energy, representing almost 14,000 communities across the world. And you will hear a little bit more about them and our cooperation with the Global Covenant and Signify in just a couple of minutes. The European Commission, as well as a number of governments across the world, different institutions, UN agency, city networks that have a global presence, as well as a number of partners from the private sector, including, of course, Signify, that are helping us not only build knowledge, to build capacity and learning for our communities on what are the options and the pathways that they can embrace for their transition, but also to test and to receive some more, let's say, technical assistance to roll out some of the solutions that are available. So how do we work, and why are we interested in discussing about lighting? Well, Mario already mentioned we do work directly with cities. At the moment, our cohort counts 136 communities from 51 countries across the world. And as you can see, the aggregated potential of emission reduction of just this number of cities is quite relevant and important. So we calculate that just by continuing on this trajectory that these cities have started on, we will be able to reduce the equivalent of almost 16 million round trips flying between Istanbul in Turkey and Buenos Aires in Argentina by 2050. So a growing community with an incredible potential, a potential that is growing day by day. We support them with, as I mentioned before, knowledge, technical assistance, capacity building, but also with the opportunity to pilot and to really understand how to deploy specific technologies on the ground. And all of this information, this knowledge that we are building, all of the assistance that we are providing, it's always very much driven by their needs. We investigate with each one of them individually through interviews, to get together, through current and continuous conversation, what are the core needs, these pain points that they are listing as, let's say, at the very top of their priority when it comes to urban transitions. As you can see, more than a quarter of them have flagged energy efficiency as one of the top priorities that they are facing. Of course, lighting most often when assessing priorities is being portrayed in that specific envelope, but in reality, while we talk and we investigate further what the needs of our cities are, we very swiftly realize that it's not just there, that we cannot look at that specific sector without expanding to all the other needs and seeing how these different pieces of the puzzle are combined together. So we talk about intake of renewable energy in our energy system. And now, for example, through having more efficient lighting, we are also able not only to have savings, but also to meet our quota of renewable energy and amplify the amount of renewable energy in our demand. We talk about mobility and the way that lighting infrastructure can, for example, help manage better as integrated infrastructure, our mobility, and be responsive in the way that we manage our traffic flow, but even looking into the air quality, and how traffic flows are impacting on this specific quality of air in our communities. It's also very much connected to social inclusion when we look at lighting as a way to bring forward opportunities to activate, for example, the night economy, and I'll talk a little bit about it later, but also to help people reclaim the spaces in the city, feel more safe, more secure. urban regeneration is very attached to this point as well, being able also to provide these services other in areas that are potentially more, let's say, difficult in terms of vulnerabilities, but also very often in areas that might be still informal. So they might not have a direct access to grid. They might not be able to be connected directly to the, let's say, infrastructure of lighting that the rest of the city is already being served with. And then finally, of course, the connection again with the buildings. We talk about lighting outdoor as a very much a priority and one of the, let's say, low-hanging fruit, and I will use this word in just a few minutes again for cities, but we should also consider, of course, lighting within public buildings, and even in many parts of the world where the quality of lighting is still not so good, as access for citizens to be able to have an opportunity to work a little bit longer during the night, to study a little bit longer during the night. So all of these different pieces come together and they are all interconnected and intertwined with what lighting can do for the future of our cities. So we realized by working with our communities that lighting can be really a critical enabler for our net zero transition. They are a bit of a hidden in plain sight engine, right, of urban transformation. They can help us bridge the gap between this vision that we have of a climate ambition and really literally, the way that we live our street level reality. And the truth is that even though, despite being a staple when it comes to climate action plans, the full potential of these infrastructures, of this technology, are often still left untapped. First and foremost, the, let's say, more kind of technological shift between the quality of the lighting that is being utilized, but more and more we also see the need for a bigger leap in terms of the infrastructure and the way that we can use lighting infrastructure as a place for integration of our infrastructure to facilitate interoperable infrastructure in our community and really serve as a bit of a backbone through this infrastructure of these compounded transitions that we want to see happening at the same time. So we're really looking to also understanding better and realizing the full potential, the co-benefits that this technology can bring. So in this relation, we can kind of pinpoint three main trends and horizons, starting with, let's say, the more direct one around reducing energy consumption, reducing emission, and catalyzing and supporting our net zero transition. So first and foremost, by shifting technology, we can reduce energy demand and cut by 2030 the impressive amount of greenhouse gas emissions, just starting by replacing the remaining traditional lamps with LED technologies. But there is an increasing 20%, an additional 20 to 30% of potential reduction that can come just by using this infrastructure and the information, for example, via artificial intelligence or the application of Internet of Things, to adjust the traffic, to comply with weather, to be as responsive as possible to the ecosystem of our cities. The modularity of the design, but also the more conscious use of materials can also boost our decarbonization processes, looking into recycling and circularity of the products that are being purchased via procurement by our municipalities. The second big trend builds a little bit upon what I already mentioned around the possibility to integrate this different infrastructure and to manage our holistic transition. And we go into the multifunctionality that some of this infrastructure can really bear fruit for our cities. We can, as I mentioned before, not just use a lighting point, a lighting infrastructure as a way to make our city brighter, but also to track information, to monitor data around air quality, around noise, around foot traffic, and even increasingly with some consideration around temperature and tackling issues such as heat island effects in cities. All this real-time data and insights can also help us not just address, for example, congestions in traffic, but also integrating renewable sources, avoid congestion in our grid, and support us in understanding the capacity for storage that our communities also need to utilize for the future. So freeing a lot of potential new energy, freeing a lot of electricity that can be powered, for example, can be powering, for example, buses or electric vehicles. So using a little bit as a way to model the way that we use our energy grid in a more responsive manner. Similarly, this infrastructure can also help us be more responsive in a dynamic manner to the issues related to climate change. And not just events and emergency that relate to climate change, but even other city events that might really have an impact on our day-to-day operation in cities. So the responsiveness of our infrastructure can definitely benefit from this integration. Lastly, the third pillar, I would say, an horizon that we see ahead of us is really related to the co-benefits, as I mentioned before. This is very important because we don't see lighting anymore just as a technology, but with our cities, we are trying to explore what is the potential in terms of impact, quality of living, well-being of our citizens, safety of our citizens, looking into how to use this physical, let's say, form to help us connect communities, give them more space to live within our cities, to generate further social inclusion, but also to empower our citizens themselves in having more space to communicate with each other, and to also, to a certain extent, share the importance of having really reclaiming back the spaces in our cities. So a bit of a reflection on where we stand right now. I mentioned before the word low-hanging fruit. And we know that in a lot of climate action plans of, for example, the 14,000 signatories that belong to the Global Covenant of Mayors, lighting is a little bit of a staple as a measure that our cities are looking into to somehow accelerate their transition and to reduce their emissions. But we wanted to understand, how does that affect implementation in practice? How many of them have migrated from including these measures within their plan into an implementation phase, and what has been the impact of the actions undertaken? So together with the colleagues at Signify and of course the Global Covenant of Mayors, we launched a survey to really assess the status of lighting infrastructure in urban area. We sent out a questionnaire with 31 questions. We were able to collect around 7,000 data points with 45 cities from across the world being included. The survey was translated in 10 languages, and we were able to develop a fully fledged analysis of our results with some pointers, not only on where we stand right now, but also what do we see as the next step for enabling a better transition by using lighting and lighting infrastructure as an integrated way to support climate transition in cities. And I invite you all to scan that QR code, and we will put also the link to our survey and to our report in particular later in the chat, but scan and have a look for yourself more in detail to what the analysis tells you. I'll give you just a little appetizer to make sure that you find it interesting and that you want to read more about what we have learned from our work together. First and foremost, we understood that although there is a low-hanging fruit opportunity there, and about 90% of the cities that we addressed have included lighting improvements in the climate action plan, very often the measures are still restricted very much to a switch between old and new technology. So there is not yet a full understanding of the potential optimization that we can have, the holistic approaches that we can bring forward by replacing our light infrastructure or modernizing actually our infrastructure. The initial focus for most of our communities remains very much outdoor lighting. This is a bit for, of course, for easiness in terms of procurement processes, but it also has to do with the visibility in terms of what citizens can see and the ease of implementation. That said, indoor lighting upgrade can have a substantial impact in the municipal building, in the energy consumption of the building and the energy consumption overall of our municipalities. And here you can see from our graph that about 50% of the whole energy bill of our cities is dedicated specifically to lighting. So it's definitely not something to be discarded as a percentage. It's a quite relevant one as an area of action. We also analyzed a little bit what are the reasons behind some of this lagging behind with fully exploiting the potential in the implementation of these measures. And first and foremost, we found out that there is still a tendency to have a fragmented planning. 2/3 of the cities that we have consulted lacked a strategic and harmonized lighting plan. So there might be measures, there might be specific kind of projects identified, but very often they don't speak to each other, and they might not speak to the full strategy of decarbonization and resilience of the city. And this missed integration result often also in uneven quality of the projects that are being implemented, and sometimes also takes a token on the funding. Very often aggregating all of these different projects will, by pooling and bundling together these different projects, opportunities to apply for additional funding and for larger tickets of financial support would be much more possible. But because of this fragmentation, this opportunity, there is a bit of a missed opportunity in terms of the integration of the cost and the funding opportunity itself. This also results in an administrative burden. Again, something that takes a toll on our cities, and this lack of centralized planning can result in a slowdown in terms of approval and therefore implementation across activities, especially when it brings on board different sectors within the municipality. We mentioned already before that there is still a lack of understanding of maybe the full deployment of new technology, so the low-tech readiness, both in terms of understanding what can be deployed, but also in affecting the quality of the terms of reference that are being included in procurement and therefore in new purchases the cities are making, in their collaboration, of course, also with their providers, might not reflect fully the potential that these different shifts and actions could have in the future. And the scale of change also suffers from this disaggregated kind of management of these different projects. We also realized that, as I mentioned before, lack of coherence, projects that kind of are driven forward in an independent manner are having an effect in terms of access to financing and in increasing also administrative burdens on cities. And we also realized that very often cities, around 60% of the one that we have interviewed and surveyed, do not use yet external funding, be that private sector, blended finance model, to support, for example, investment in this specific infrastructure. So this complexity is also, let's say, boosted, unfortunately, by sometimes a lack of understanding of what type of models could be applied, a lack of understanding of new business model like lighting as a service, for example, as an opportunity to rethink the infrastructures around lighting in the city. And the infrastructural, let's say, burden that cities still have to face across the world around outdated energy grids, poor transit, lack of digital access, all of those things that would allow this infrastructure to be truly integrated, interoperable, also restrict, of course, the deployment of this new technology, and therefore to understand the benefits and sometimes to even receive the adequate political and administrative support. Finally, we realized that most of the time, the planning around this lighting infrastructure is done in a very responsive manner, rather than being, a willful strategy that is being developed to respond to the specific needs of making our city more resilient, net zero, decarbonized, inclusive. It's more of a one-on-one replacement, a little measure on safety, a little measure on cost saving, reducing the long-term, but also the kind of holistic impact that this type of changes in our infrastructure and in this technology can really have. So we kind of identified 5 areas that are the main areas for action, where we feel that communities and of course, in partnership with our colleagues and partners here, we should try to pursue. First and foremost, understanding better the enabling frameworks and the instruments that could catalyze lighting transitions. I mentioned this preparedness to understand the technology, but also to see what type of business models or holistic planning can be done. How do we integrate this infrastructure, not just as a mean to literally shed light in our streets, but as a way of contributing to the transition. Execution needs to be supported. So overall, climate action plans will benefit from additional support in implementation, be that learning new skill or having access to knowledge and to innovative solution, but also, once again, understanding better regulatory frameworks within which our cities are operating and possibility for funding as well. Expertise is still very much needed, so building knowledge in a way to enhance capabilities of our communities, but also empowering them to make the right decision in collaborating with partner, contracting agents, but also in procuring the correct technologies that can fit more their overarching necessities. And then finally, of course, boosting forward the message around efficiency that these changes and these transitions of technology can make as a driver to reduce greenhouse gas emission, but also as a way to improve quality of life locally. And then finally, even starting, this may vary region by region of the world, of course, but starting from completing the replacement or the shift from old technologies to new one to unlock more efficiency gains. So I now want to share with you a couple of inspiring examples to show you that it is true, these type of changes can make the difference, and they can have an impact that goes beyond the lighting system per se and have a repercussion, a positive one, an impact, a positive one across the world. So starting from how these type of solutions can help us catalyze net zero transition, I want to share with you an example from the US, from Chicago, where lighting had a major role and a contribution to the objective that the city had, not only to cut emissions, but also to make to become 100% renewable. So the challenge there was managing a very large number of aging light points and street lights. We're talking about 280,000 intensive high pressure sodium street lights. The maintenance was very reactive, with a lot of phone calls from citizens contacting the city. The city thought about it, and they decided to, through the Department of Transportation, to replace the existing infrastructure with high efficiency LED, and to carry out this upgrade, not just by replacing the infrastructure, but also utilizing an IoT network that is centrally managed for real-time monitoring, control, and predictive maintenance. So through applying this plan, the city was able not only to roll out infrastructures and to provide wireless and automated nodes that could alert a precise location where for example, maintenance was needed, and tracking where different changes would be needed within the system, but also to include a clause in the rollout of the technology that mandated that 50% of the labor that will be utilized, or the workforce that will be utilized in this project, will be Chicago resident, and prioritizing minority business. So here again, it's not just an impact on the technology, it's an impact on the local economy for the city itself. In terms of the cutting of emission, that was my premise. This measure, the change of lighting helped enable the city to achieve the 100% renewable energy electricity for municipal operation already by last year, by 2025, cutting roughly 290,000 metric tons of CO2 yearly, not only by reducing the consumption of lighting, but also by reducing, for example, the maintenance and the track rolls footprint for the maintenance. By slashing this municipal energy load, the program that was applied by the city made possible for the city to advance as much as possible in their goal to reach 100% renewable by 2035. That's the projection that we have at the moment, not only in terms of freeing or reducing the energy consumption that now can be met with a renewable energy quota, but also by making it financially viable. The second example I want to share with you also comes from across the ocean from where I'm sitting, from Buenos Aires in Argentina. And again, it's a nice combination of cutting emission, but also bringing together an impact that goes beyond that and more into the safety and resilience aspect related to the city. So high energy consumption was, of course, a big issue for the current lighting infrastructure that was in Buenos Aires. The decision was to redevelop and to rethink multi-purpose infrastructure that would replace incandescent and old technology with 91,000 smart LED luminaries to achieve almost 100% coverage for the city. This data and this infrastructure were utilized not only to manage the lighting itself through a dashboard, but also to correlate the brightness data with crime statistics. The thinking there was to try to see how the impact of the application of the lighting infrastructure could also be used to make areas safer and to make this place for citizens more livable and comfortable. In addition, the same infrastructure were also used to gather data and information around municipal assets and to monitor storm drain activity to mitigate flood risk during heavy rains. So again, here we have a reduction of consumption, thinking around how do we support resilience locally and improve our adaptation measure, but also how do we think about the quality of life of our citizens. So the path of net zero through integrated lighting goes beyond just the reduction of the emission and the potential increase of renewable energy share in our communities, which of course remains very important, but it also allows us to respond to specific events, to really think about proactive maintenance, to collect data for better long-term strategy. So for us, integrating in the long run, lighting with us more, let's say, more smarter and broader lighting and digital infrastructure can help us share sensor data, create more, let's say, transversal strategy to help our forecasting and our planning and the interoperability of our infrastructure in the future. Now I want to share a couple of examples starting from the point of view of resilience and adaptation. And I'll stay in Latin America for this one and take you to Colombia, to Cartagena de Indian, where the resilience was not just about adaptation, but also about preservation of cultural heritage. So Cartagena is a beautiful city with a UNESCO World Heritage standing, facing severe corrosion from the Caribbean salinity. So there were high maintenance costs, high light pollution that maybe wasn't making the center look so pretty and so welcoming for tourists, but also for citizens very much alike, really threatening the aesthetic of at nighttime. So the solution was to rethink about the modernization of the technology applied and to try to find a way to preserve not only the heritage, but also to control extreme environmental conditions due to the salinity. So by changing the fixture and utilizing new materials that were salt air corrosion resistant, and they were able to prevent not only rust stain on facade, but also maintaining with good quality infrastructure the vibe of the city with a significant reduction on light pollution, long-term durability of these solutions in terms of also impact on the environment, and drastically reducing the need for frequent replacement and maintenance. So bringing a new vibe to a very old and very beautiful city across the world. We now move a little bit more to the actual, let's say, response that lighting can help provide when it comes to emergency. And I want to travel to Puerto Rico to share the experience of the city, but a large of the entirety of Puerto Rico following a hurricane. Most of the traditional lighting system was tied and connected with a centralized grid. So thousands of miles of overhead lines were the one that would make sure that the grid was running, that the lighting was flowing in the streets. Following the hurricane, the grid collapsed. And a lot of the cities, including the two ones that I mentioned here, San Juan and Adjuntas, found themselves without light to actually be able to respond to medical emergency, to operate response, and to control crime at the same time. So they thought about a solution, the installation of off-grid smart solar street lights. These specific street lights were using a system that would allow for adaptive lighting software, de facto monitoring through the conditions and assessing in real time how much to extend the lifespan of the battery that would provide the light. So from let's say if the battery was low due to a storm cloud, for example, the system will be able to automatically dim lights across the board, maybe to 30% brightness, and to extend the battery life from 3 days to over 10 days of autonomy. The lessons learned here not only brought forward the idea of having a specific resilience center where now street lighting is a critical service and it's 100% operated via local microgrids, but also inspired countries and experiences the city across the world. Lately, in Ukraine, for example, where again, this responsive lighting powered by solar can provide support without the need of trenching, without the need of cable, without the need of installation that would be too costly in terms of time, but also maybe not as fit in terms of quick response as needed. So the path of resilience the lighting can support definitely goes into looking into not only how to support data collection for resilient strategy and identify different stressors. I mentioned before floods, but I also mentioned urban Italia effect at the very beginning, but also to look into how can we use this real-time data that we can connect in a way that bring information across sector and that can help us tackle hard challenges that will not only affect our citizens, but also our extended infrastructure. Connected lighting in particular can help cities in emergency and to roll out emergency services and responses, and to help us also provide proactive maintenance, ensuring that critical infrastructures are always operable, are always functional before extreme weather events actually are happening. The incredible power of decentralized solar power system is also to guarantee illumination, and we talk about today how they can support evacuation, for example, or first response. But in many parts of the world, and I'll talk about it in just a minute, this also means day-to-day access to lighting, day-to-day access to the normal things that we are doing every day, our studying, our reading, the possibility to keep our shops open at night. So to go to the third dimension, how do we make sure the lighting also help us in our transition to more inclusive future? I want to share a couple of examples coming from Kenya in this case, where replacing lighting meant not only cutting emissions, not only replacing harmful technologies like kerosene power lamps, for example, in houses, but also improving the overall resilience of a system. So in countries across the world, we still have areas, especially those that are maybe not urban, but rather rural or maybe informal and not so connected with the centralized infrastructure, where lighting poverty still exists, where the national grid might not reach and is not available, and where often people use hazardous let's say substances to power up, to light their own house, their own households. Through the deployment of off-grid solar LED solution and nanogrids or portable lighting solution, we can provide, of course, clean, renewable energy to rural villages, to displaced settlements, and to informal settlements that are not connected to the grid. Through this independence, we are able to use poles that can capture, of course, energy by day. And by utilizing sensor, we can not only make sure that we are having the right output at night and that we support, let's say, better quality of lighting, more healthy quality of lighting for cities without trenching and cabling, but also that we can take into consideration, for example, how do we impact on nocturnal animal? How do we interact with the biodiversity in these ecosystems? This has brought, of course, a massive reduction in literally indoor air pollution quality. Has also helped, and I mentioned, before, children being able to read at night, but in average, through this technology, in this project in particular, we calculated that roughly a child could gain around 1 to 2 hours of post-sunset time for studying, and really being able to increase the reading speed with a proper lighting that is about 35%. So this type of technology has a real life impact on people and on the way that they are also conducting the day-to-day life and planning for their future. The second example I want to share comes from Kampala, from Uganda. And here we go again to tackle the solutions and the co-benefits of off-grid solar for inclusive public lighting. Here in particular, the solution and the challenge was trying to respond to an urgent need for public lighting that could boost economic activity during nighttime. This would contribute to public safety, but literally allow, for example, a woman that runs a shop to be able to keep the shop open at night with light being still turned on. So there was a strategic deployment of standalone solar street light networks by a local municipal government to bypass a grid that in that moment was still fragile and to provide more sustainable and consistent illumination. So via the installation of this infrastructure of over 1,800 streetlights, a network was created independently from the central grid, and through the cooperation between the national government of Uganda and several local authorities, as well as informal settlements across the country. So by utilizing this technology that did not require, again, trenching and cabling, it was possible to make the overarching infrastructure more resilient and to really support higher income for shopkeepers, a thriving night economy, and to boost a replication that started from Kampala and when it became more and more important and a good example for the largest part of the country itself. Lowering the cost, first and foremost, of this access to this technology, but also the maintenance cost of these technologies. So lighting can really also lit up, I would say, a path to inclusiveness. We are talking something that is not just about physical and physics, right? We are talking about a power to also drive forward inclusivity, to make our life more comfortable, but also to help our communities and our economies to thrive. So changing a little bit the geometry, not only in vulnerable areas where we are trying to tackle crime and to support safety, but also allowing citizens to reclaim the space, reclaim the city, and to keep their activities also running at night or as much as they would like to do so, to support their own family, to support their own learning, to support their own future. So I would like to just conclude charting a bit of a way forward that we see ahead of us, reflecting of the potential of integrated lighting into how they can galvanize holistic urban policies for healthier and for more inclusive cities. We think that enhancing multi-level governance and aligning the goals that we have at the different level of government is essential to support urban development having this conversation on how to support these infrastructural changes that are needed, but also starting to think more holistic about how this infrastructure fits with the rest of the transition and with all the other infrastructures that we are trying to ameliorate. Harmonizing the policies, so looking into not just about how do we make light more available in our cities, but how does it help boosting sustainability, inclusivity, safety, our smart city development, if that's what we are thinking about, with all the possibilities that we have now with AI and data and digital and sensor. How do we make that a holistic package? Applying green procurement standards to ensure that we are not just looking for the most convenient solutions, but we are looking for lasting solutions, that we are looking for sustainable public investment that goes into this multiple benefits dimension. Providing funding and providing training to empower cities to understand better, not only how to scale available technologies, but how to integrate these technologies into their overarching plan. And then finally, leveraging global platforms to scale innovation and accelerate lighting efficiency. So, of course, as a mission, we are a space, we are a platform where we have the opportunity to collaborate with cities and with partners like Signify, but to see how these lessons learned can be amplified across the world to create that space to really accelerate the understanding of how this piece of the puzzle fits into the beautiful picture of the future that we are trying to build together. So I think